All right, you are all set.
Okay, thank you. We're all set? Right. Well, thank you everybody, first of all, for being so patient. We had a couple of few issues here to get Lisa on a screen. We have got everything. Hopefully you'll be able to see everything. My name is Professor Carola Dillenberger. I'm from Queen's University Centre, the director of the Centre for Behaviour Analysis. And I welcome everybody to the 2021 webinar series that we've been running with a webinar every month, or we took a break in August, but we're back with a vengeance this September with Lisa Blakemore. I'm delighted to introduce to you Lisa. Lisa has been is well known to some of you because I think our audience is mostly UK based. Lisa is a registered educational psychologist with the HCPC, and after getting her bachelor's degree, she obtained a master's in educational psychology and clinical practice from the University of London. She then ran a behaviour unit in a school for a number of years, using procedures including token economy systems and so forth, and very, very successfully. In 2001, she wrote the book Reweaving the Autistic Tapestry that was mentioned in the House of Lords in 2003. And for the last nearly 30 years, she's been an expert witness in various court settings and in educational tribunals. And her first ABA-related Sentenced tribunal was in 1995. And I think that's probably not going to want to take more time from you, Lisa, and I will just switch my own video off, I think, and let you get on with your talk.
Okay. Thank you, Carola. Okay, well, I mean, I don't know who's there. I'm sort of completely blind here, but I've got the talk in front of me, so I'm just going to get started. The title, The Long Road, I decided on this because it is a long road, trying to access services if you want ABA. It can be a very long road. And I'm sorry if this entire talk is going to be completely pessimistic, but I want to sort of signpost a few of the things that, you know, people may have facing now, so that, you know, you can try and do something about it. So we'll just go on to the next thing. You've already got this subtitle here, because we are talking about trying to help children. Most of the children that I see are young, non-verbal or very little language, and through ABA, by the time I've seen them, they've already been on a program successfully, and it's enabled parents, probably for the first time, to take them out to go to cafes and parks and other things they never could before, all kinds of other things that they've learned. And the next thing, of course, that they want to do is to have ABA in the curriculum. And that's where the problems start, and they end up in the courtroom. So I'm just going to go through, you know, from the early stages, how long it can take to get the support for your child. We've got some examples a little bit further on, but there are people who've logged into this talk today who know that they have been fighting for years to get the right support. They've gone back to tribunal after tribunal to get ABA. ABA has become very difficult to get, and it's not impossible, because we win a lot of tribunals, and a lot of people do have ABA. But so this is that rocky road. I'm just going to go through it now. Here are some of the early delays. So again, this is a systems thing that really needs to be changed. So really early on, between 1 and 2 years of age, signs of autism do show up. And whether the child regressed, was able to talk and then stopped, or whether that's something that just appears to emerge, that's roughly the kind of age, the time at which there are signs. And a health visitor may pick it up, but they may not. generally the old-fashioned view, and traditionally I've written, is has been watch and wait. Sorry about the spelling there. So the pathway, as they call it, the health pathway to a diagnosis, again, is a very long road, and it's set, the responsibility is set within the health authority, and appointments can be few and far between as paediatricians wait to see if the child really needs the help, if the child really has autism. And then if it looks as if they have, even before a diagnosis, they may make a suggestion for a referral to a speech therapist. That's a bit longer. And then a referral to the appropriate authority for education. So what people will find is that there's a huge overlap where they're trying to get help and advice from the health authorities, and at the same time they're having to look forward to getting the child in a school. And of course it matters where, and it matters what they get. So I've said at the end here, a sort of nod to my my tapestry metaphor, that the crucial collaborative interweave, which is actually embedded in the model of the education, health and care plans, it can fragment early, because it can start right at this point. So what happens is a parent, let's say they get the diagnosis, or there are flags that are sent to the speech therapist and the education authorities. Health professionals have and do suggest ABA. So psychologists in health service and paediatricians have and do suggest ABA in this country, but not within education authorities. So what people will find is that these are an example here of some of the approaches that may be suggested to them. If not initially, certainly down the line. It's standard fare within special schools and within units. So this is sort of generally, I suppose, called an eclectic model. And so these are the sort of things that parents would be told to try. And of course they will. And I've missed out one, which is, of course, the parent group, which is really where, and there's been something recently in the news about early recognition of diagnosis, and then being able to sort of change things by looking at videos of usually mothers with their children. We've done this decades ago, but I'm not going to talk about that paper right now. There's a lot to say, but I'm not going to talk about it. So the next thing that's interesting is that some of those interventions, some of the interventions which will be recommended, which are sort of tangible things, you can pick them up, get them off a shelf, they were actually developed by behaviour analysts, but those people are hidden behind the product. And so the branded products and the training for a number of these approved interventions actually do have BCBAs involved behind the scenes. So in tribunals, you will have a local authority legal rep, or you'll have their barrister. It depends whether they want to spend 10, 20 or 30,000 pounds to come and inform everyone that they don't want ABA. But they will suggest, for example, PECs, whilst criticising ABA. And as I've said here, it creates a very dangerous impression. And I was thinking about this today. It's sort of quite compelling, isn't it? If it's something you can kind of take off a shelf and then say, right, well, we've got that, and somebody's had a few hours training on it. You know, many people have said, unfortunately, the training is extremely limited. And what's missing, even in the intensive interaction and so on, is a proper analysis of what one's trying to achieve, how it's going, how you change it, and alter whatever particular procedure you've got in place. That doesn't happen. So it's become rather pedestrian, and used everywhere. And people, the ABA people on this will know full well that they use PECs. So this is another confusing aspect that people who criticise ABA don't, and whilst actually recommending these products, don't actually realise what's behind them. So I've put a couple of references here, to the wonderful Carola and Mickey, who have written so much. I could have filled the whole talk talking about what they've written. I don't really know why they want to listen to me, to be honest. But anyway, there's a couple of things there which I think are very useful, these references here, because as you can see in this slide, so the parent goes along, a long time's passed, they may have a very difficult child, and they don't find that the child's making much progress. In fact, it could be getting a lot worse. And that's the point when they may start to look themselves. A number of parents have said to me, why did they not tell me? Why did nobody tell me about this? When they actually start to use a good program and find that they can see changes very, very quickly. And I did that. That was my 95 case. It was extraordinary to me that you'd see a child spending 10 odd years in a special school and leaving not much different, except they're a lot bigger. And within a week, you would actually get a child sort of compliant and happy. So these are the sort of things when parents see that, they end up having to pay for it. So then they go to schools. Usually they go to the school first, the nursery, and they ask them if they can use ABA in school. Many do say yes. It just gets tricky when they have to go to a tribunal. But these are some of the things that people will say to them. And these are things that have been said. We don't use ABA, it doesn't work. We use best practice methods. So there are certain key phrases which, if you use them, it gives a kind of impression of superiority. So, quality first teaching, best practice, evidence-based. It all sounds rather marvellous. And so this is the way parents often are sort of fobbed off, really. And then this second one is something that I found in a case I was looking earlier for some examples, that autistic children need to learn intrinsically. So this child had done extremely well on a program and was transitioning into school, and the psychologist said, "Oh, that's fine now. You've done what's needed, all the basics. Now they need to learn intrinsically with their peers." So we won that one, and she is learning intrinsically with ABA with her peers. Then we have NICE, and I know that Carola and Mickey are the best people to talk about what's gone on there. There are some interesting changes with NICE. There are working parties that don't include any specialists in ABA, who determine that ABA either is or isn't of any value. But gradually, your one's picking up some changes. So they will talk about functional analysis. They'll talk about that. But that is, the background, ABA. So they'll talk about things again, as we've just spoken earlier, that, they don't realise that that's what that is. They also realised, I think, a while ago, and so did the NHS, that for challenging behaviour, you really do need to get really into some proper sort of behaviour analysis. You really need to know what you're looking at, and you need to know what to do. For a long time, there's been far too much restraining. When I was first working in '84, people would say, teachers would say, "Can you just tell me," in special school, "can you just tell me how I can restrain them without hurting them?" I can remember thinking and saying, well, actually, hey, how about communicating with them? And then maybe you won't need to restrain them. And of course, that's gone on for an awful long time. And there's been all sorts of games played with, all sorts of things, which I know that some of us need to use, but that's another issue. So NICE buried within its guidelines. And I'm going to go to the bottom bullet point there where it says ABA is harmful. And this is something that has been said a number of times, and I've got more slides to go into that. So that really is it's shameful. Somebody did a survey to say that it caused PTSD, and that was raised by a barrister in a tribunal. And these things need to be opened up to the air, really. So the harmful thing, just this year, I think in June, NICE actually said when a particular stakeholder said it was harmful, actually said, we have found no evidence that ABA is harmful. So that's the start. We've now got the BPS guidelines, which came out in August. And the BPS don't always get things right. In fact, they frequently get things very wrong, and I have done this time. They've actually, and I'm going to come on to another slide in a second to give you a couple of references, and you can look this up yourself, because there's a challenge to this, and it's from our very own professors here today. And there needs to be a challenge, because again, it's another thing where the old guard, who've never been keen on ABA in the NHS and so on, in the NAS, I should say, they've been wheeled in to decide what the guidelines should be, and they've been changed. So we'll look at that one in a second. Now, this next one is incredible, and this was something that I was told by a person running a unit who actually didn't know the child, and it was a week before the tribunal where she was going to go and talk about him and how they could meet his needs. And I just asked her generally, what's your opinion, about ABA? She said, oh, can't waste time going around with clipboards to collect data for parents for financial gain. And I was absolutely astonished. And that's well, they didn't win, let's put it that way. But that was quite an incredible thing to say. Within a week, I should tell you, she was hugely confident. And I do know that Carola and Mickey again have referred to the Dunning-Kruger syndrome in this article at the bottom there, the drama in the courtroom. It's absolutely right. It's about people who know very little thinking they know a lot, that they don't know what they don't know. And that's absolutely applied in that situation. The next one is very classic, very typical. We don't agree with one size fits all. And this is really because they don't understand it. It's nice having a whole pile of stuff, well, we've got this, we've got that, and we've got this, and we've got that. But they don't understand that one's talking about a science here. It's not a product that you take off a shelf. So this is it's quite hard hitting, I suppose. This what I'm saying here is that misinformation needs to be challenged, because it's very dangerous. We're living a very odd time right now. And we have all sorts of people saying all sorts of things off the top of their head without even a backward glance, and it can cause a great deal of damage. And this is for people who really suffered from this misinformation. I refer to it as gaslighting, because really that's what it is. If parents are being told things that are not true, and then their child is damaged by not having the right support, then what are you going to do? I've said FOI. I don't know if everybody understands what that is who may be logged in, but it's freedom of information. And under those rules, you can actually ask what's happened, what's been done, what sort of discussions people have had behind the scenes about your child, and you, maybe, and so on. And it's a powerful tool, and it needs to be used. And it's not being horrible and nasty. If people are being horrible and nasty to you, then you need to use these sorts of tools, really. So did I skip over did I skip over that one? No, this is yeah, it follows this one. So that this is another person who had no idea what ABA was about, an educational psychologist, no idea, and one of many. Just one simple example. I found it interesting that there are references to believe in here, and I've put them in italics. So this person came to the tribunal saying she hadn't any knowledge whatsoever about ABA, but she patronised the parents, saying that she knew they believed in it. She knew they believed in it, but actually the local authority didn't believe in it, and they didn't think it's appropriate. And fortunately, we had a wonderful judge and panel member who said, when she started to talk about the BPS guidelines, but you're not an expert. You've told us you know nothing about it. Oh, but I've done this. And they said, what, anti-ABA? You've gone looking for something. He said, well, you don't know. You can't tell us whether this is of value to this child because you're not an expert. And I've seen that a few times. So, but this is a worrying sort of thing that's happening. So because of that, I mean, because of what the BPS have done, and that's certainly, one of the first examples I've seen of it being used to against ABA. But before that, of course, Carola and Mickey had already written a paper working with autism, and it's a response to the BPS guidelines. Very important. So I put sort of two references there. But the first one is the direct challenge to those BPS guidelines. It's very, very, very good paper, and a really good paper. Lots of links in it as well. Really worth reading. So now this is another one that's actually raising its head. It's most unfortunate. It's very sad. It's the neurodiversity movement, who regard ABA, or at least they've got a bandwagon on it, and when they're on it, this is what they say, that ABA just wants to cure or get rid of autistic people, and they see it as it's about rights, and a number of people have actually called it conversion therapy, saying that it's about trying to get rid of the autism. So, for example, when cochlear implants came in, there was the sort of the deaf community that immediately were up in arms about that. And one can understand parents with children with exceptionally severe autism, who aren't toilet trained, who can be wild. Many parents said, well, like an animal. And they can't speak. They're not the articulate people who make these claims. In jobs, grown up people, many of whom may self-diagnose themselves with autism. These are the desperate little children who will maybe never speak if they're not supported. And I don't think we can really say that movement speaks for those children. I can speak for those children and say they don't speak for those children. So this is and I know, because if you were in a room now, you'd be saying, well, you put that on, there's too many words. But I know, because you're on a screen, you'll be able to sort of make it bigger. And this is again from an article by the great Dylan Berger and Keenan, and who picked up on this interesting quote from Kaufman, and what I find really fascinating about this is that it seems to be that's the problem. You know, the Senko who said we can't be going around with a clipboard picking up data for the benefit of parents. So if we knock out the business of the benefit of the parents and the financial incentives and so on, goodness knows what that is. But it seems to come down to not either not being capable of, not willing to do the grafting, the hard graft that's involved with properly observing and analysing and checking and going back again and again and again. It's that seems to me it's far more, it's easier to pick a thing off a shelf and say we use this. We've got a teach station over there, and that's what we do. Rather than understand the procedures, the science, and properly analyze what's going on. So this is really very interesting. You know, he likens this thing to, say, a nurse who decides it's not worth bothering looking at the detail, and then finishes it by saying, you know, what can one say of educational practice that does not include a precise definition and reliable measurement of the behavioural change induced by the teacher's methodology? It's indefensible. So I know it's difficult, and that's why those people who've trained for such a long time need to be involved, and people who haven't simply can't do it. I know that. But the juncture we're at is that rather than walk away from having to do the hard work, rather than admit and accept that there's something there that they could be using, they just need to be trained, or they need to bring the people in who are trained. That's the next step. That's what has to happen, rather than putting up fights and paying out loads of money to pretend that there are all these things wrong with it, when really they just don't want to put the graft in. For all the lovely people who disagree with that, well, I'm very sorry, but you know, I can't find any other reason. I can't think that you could really fully accept a lot of the arguments and the misinformation, truly. And I know, and I've been in some interesting tribunals where head teachers who were literally, they weren't really against, but they didn't understand it. And then they saw with their own eyes. And there was one remarkable tribunal in Manchester. And we all trooped up to Manchester and all sat down. And a barrister had been brought in. And then they had the head teacher on their side as a witness and started to ask her, you know, questions. And she said, I think it's marvellous. She said, we could use it with all the other children. The barrister, well, yes, let's put it this way, we weren't very happy. And she was delighted by it. And I'll never ever forget it. There is a 2-person panel, and the judge just turned to the panel member, whispered something, and then said to the local authority barrister, I think you need to take a break and make a couple of phone calls. So that was rather lovely. And if people were fully honest, then we'd see a lot more of that. So this is what then happens. So let's say, you know, parents gone ahead, they've got all this information, they've ignored the misinformation because they can see with their own eyes that the value of this, but they're continuing to have to pay for it. Child's getting older, and they want to actually have this form of support in the school, and not have the child all day, every day, you know, with some of the other methods that simply aren't doing anything for them. So if they manage to get an EHC plan, and that can be another stage, it can take a long time, they may refuse it. If it's refused, so first it goes to a panel, that takes ages. Then if it's refused, then it comes back, and then another load of time. And then they may have to go to a tribunal to just get an EHC plan. Once they do, the next step is to actually complete it. And that's the point when typically right the way through, ABA is the bit that's left out. There's no movement. There's no movement on that bit. So you might get movement in other bits, a little bit of understanding, and oh, okay, we'll change that word. And oh, well, we don't mind that bit, but not ABA. So that stays in bold on the EHC plan because that's what the parents want. So at this point, then parents, if they either accept it or they decide they're going to go ahead and they go to tribunal. If they do, they have to find their own professionals, because local authority professionals have been captured. They will not. It's a rare breed that will actually, sometimes they describe something very similar to ABA, and they will say sometimes, well, he works much better with his ABA tutor. He spends much longer and all this. But when it comes to recommendations, it's not there. So they have to find their own professionals. They have to pay for this themselves. You get deadline dates. So on that timeline, that long road, you're carrying on. Dates can change. Before the pandemic, multiple changes of dates and postponements, not enough judges, no courtrooms. That's improved because we can do this now. But it's devastating for parents when that kind of thing happens. There can also be delays with local authorities. They don't put their reports in for the deadline, and then they read the parents' ones and then put theirs in after that. And then they sometimes will bring in late evidence. I had one not long ago where the evidence was brought in about 9 o'clock the night before. And it's usually accepted. People say, oh, you can't possibly accept it. There was a deadline and we're all killing ourselves for that deadline 3 weeks ago. No, it doesn't matter because their argument will be, this is up-to-date information. I'm sure you want it. And so tribunals usually accept it on the grounds of fairness, really. So you start an appeal. Once parents know, then, that's what they've got to do. They start an appeal. We call them education, health and care plans now, not statements. And Wales has just now started to use what they call ALNs, which is additional learning needs. That's been coming for a while. Wales doesn't like to use the same words that we use in England. And apparently it's different, so we'll see. So I just put down here some of the obstacles that one may find in the course of an appeal. I'm going to go through it quickly because I know we were late, and I'm not sure, Carola, what because there would be questions and things. But shall I just carry on? All right. Well, I'll carry on. So you will find obstacles such as the professionals for the parents who need to go into the schools in order to assess the child or to at least observe will be told they're not allowed in. They'll be told we're taking advice from the legal department, or one chap absolutely resolutely refused to let me in. That they can do it, but you can go to a tribunal and get an order if it gets really sticky. So there'll be all kinds of disagreements. You'll be dictated to when to arrive, when to leave. I was offered 2:30 in the afternoon to see one child in a special school. And of course, they're all leaving. They're putting the coats on, ready to get in the coach. So that was pretty useless. So we settled on a Zoom session, which was very good, and I recorded it because then at least I may be able to go back and pick up some of the detail. But that didn't go down very well once they realized it was recorded, because you can't really alter the truth then. So you will get BCBAs, maybe after a tribunal, or paid for by parents, then told they're not allowed, they can't come in. They upset the rest of the staff. The approach clashes, the whole range of things that are said. And as I just mentioned, local authority professionals do get coached. The sessions that happen before a tribunal, what to say, what not to say, and they will never agree to ABA. I mean, it does happen. They'll accept it, but there's always a caveat. So another few examples. I've just mentioned about seeing the reports before the deadline. It's not fair. And then applying for later dates. So this is the kind of, many a slip twixt cup and lip situation. Once you think you're there, you're on the road and you've got the dates things can still happen. And then not giving the names of who they're going to bring or changing them. These are all not very nice, not nice things to do. So I've set down a couple of things here. I've mentioned the remote thing is helpful. And I've given you an example here of something that happened a few years ago. We were in the Royal Courts of Justice in the basement. And so no light, no air, no windows. And sat for, actually, probably more than 2.5 hours. We were there before 9:30. And we didn't know what was going on because the panel and the judge didn't come out. Occasionally, they called a barrister in. Well, eventually, one of them came out and said, "It's lunchtime." And so off we went. And it seemed that they had spent the entire morning pulling apart what I'd written. And so they then decided that they were going to adjourn so that the local authority could involve their own psychologist. And the thing about that was that the local authority had asked for that at Sendis before we ever arrived that day. And they'd been told by a senior judge in the tribunal that no, they couldn't have another chance. They'd had years. So no, they couldn't. And here was this judge letting them do that. Now I can tell you that's gone on for a long time. I've got that on another slide, but it's very bad. That was very, very bad. 3 people on that panel, 2 people on the panel, and the judge, very, very much against ABA, really, and shouted at me, shouted at Mom. It's not a nice line of work sometimes. So we've also noticed this ridiculous thing of trying to remove all the language that we would use as professional people. We will describe if a child's anxious, and lots of people have said it, and we've done adaptive behavior questionnaires and what have you. We'll say, that the different things and the arguments that will come up about using words that are in test documents. One panel member is absolutely marvelous. She really challenged the local authority rep and said, "You can't take out all the technical words. What would you be left with?" And the argument is, "Oh, well, a TA's got to pick this up." Well, I mean, if they can't read, well, what are they doing as a TA? So I've said here that you have this bias, and I just mentioned at the bottom there about one particular case where my name wasn't even on the list, as if I wasn't even there, airbrushed out, and there was no reference to anything I said in the tribunal. Now, of course, that's completely unlawful. because the parents had relied on my advice and a number of other people's advice. And so then they had to wait months. It went to an upper tribunal, and they won that case. But once you win in the upper tribunal, it then has to go back to a new tribunal. So over a year passed before, well over a year, 18 months before we had another case, which we won. And then you have problems with poor management on the day, where these things could be adjourned, and poor parents, and suddenly it's, well, we're not going to finish, and or well, we're definitely finishing at 4, and it doesn't matter what argument you want to put forward or the legal people do, they won't have it. So then that's another few weeks passed by on the long road. So here's another one. This one here is the child who we were sitting in the Royal Courts of Justice waiting for them to come out. So the child was in a special school, running around with his ear defenders on, always barefoot, very, very challenging. And parents put him on an ABA program and took him out of school and applied to have it. And this was refused. The first tribunal, what was in 2017, that judge I just referred to there, we lost that for them, and it went to the upper tribunal because there were there's multiple examples of case law to show that they erred in law, many examples. And so she won, or they won, or the little boy won, and it went back. And then that went wrong again. So now that's back in the upper tribunal. That means this child now has lost 4 years. He's having a home program, but minimal and paid for by his parents. At 4 years out of the very few years that the child has in education, I think it's absolutely unacceptable. So I thought I'd sort of say a few good things before we finish. So examples of good experiences. And the good experiences happen when you've got intelligent and compassionate judges and panels. They're courteous to the parents and they give them time to speak about their child. Even if they don't, at the end of the day, give them what they want. Usually, it makes things much nicer when you get courtesy. They will prevent local authority legal representatives being rude towards the experts. They won't let that happen. And they read all the material and actually think about it carefully. They're respectful to all the witnesses, and they manage the day to prevent an adjournment. They consider the child and not the politics, and they make intelligent decisions. So just to go back on some examples of sad situations. Child B, non-verbal, 6 years old, in specialist provision in a mainstream school. I observed, and parents, mom had loaded the iPad purposefully with videos that she likes and they use as reinforcers, and the school didn't activate it. They just gave her their one, and it didn't have what she wanted on it, in my observation. So she was slightly agitated, and it was their fault. They should have used the home one, and they didn't. So then she asked for some crisps. She has the tiny edibles at home and was told no, later. And then shown a visual timetable, and the teaching assistant pointed to the lunch symbol and said, you wait till lunchtime. So of course the child really did become very, very upset, and people sort of looked at each other, and very quickly 3 adults, very big adults, one very big, and including a man, grabbed her, pulled her, trying to shove her into what's obviously they must call it a timeout room. I don't know what they were. She said she used to go in a different room where she licked all the paint off because that little fish was on there, some Finding Dory film, and she would lick. I don't know how long she was in there to lick all the paint off, but so she was in. But she was fighting for her life, with her feet on each side of the frame of the door, screaming and scratching. And they suddenly realised I was writing it all down. And they let her go, and they let her go in the toilet. And she broke her little heart. And then the teacher said, "It's over now, you can stop crying. It's over." And I was told by that person how pleased she was, because the child was self-soothing. And she said, she has to learn. She has to learn. The tribunal agreed that this child needed ABA. There's a great deal of evidence, multiple examples, and marvellous, the VB mats and the ables and so on. Very, very well done. But once it had been won, I'm afraid then a sabotage program kicked in. And it was impossible for the tutors to work there. They made it impossible for them to work there, and they left. They couldn't get anyone. Things got worse. So the mother appealed again because a school had come up that she wanted a child to go to. She kept the child off, and the teacher, the lovely one who said it's all right, it's over. She called the social services, and they went to the family home. And the first thing, according to the mother, that the social worker said was, what's this ABA? And then told her that her child would be taken from her and put into care if she didn't take her back to that school. And the mother, when I went back to see her, was on antidepressants, absolutely beside herself, in the most terrible state. Anyway, we won that one. So, another miserable slide. After winning, it may not be over. I've just given you one example of ABA being ordered. So here's a few more. A child's, so I'm calling this child's C ABA program, sabotaged through the refusal to allow the BCBA into the school. Now, this little boy spends long periods now lying on the floor. He's the one that I had the Zoom observation of, and lost a tribunal. The head teacher absolutely categorically refuses to have ABA in his school, and he said it in court. He spends a lot of time in the toilet. And the EP who shadowed me said that he was in there because he was constipated because I was observing. And I said, oh, well, hang on, are there any taps in there? So the mother, who is absolute, trooper, like most parents of children with autism, has gathered so much detailed information. And there are multiple examples of that child being fascinated by the toilet and water and taps in emails from the teacher. So it's all there. It's not about being constipated, and yet still there's a fight to actually get ABA for this child. So they talk about honouring his choices. So I would watch them when they seemed incapable of stopping him getting out of the toilet with his trousers around his ankles, running into the park. But again, the mother has put in what's called a SAR request, so subject access request under data protection, and has found many, many interesting things. And one thing is a form which has been filled in by the school describing all these behaviours that they denied he did to justify if they needed to restrain him, which they clearly must do behind closed doors. And in fact, she did find out a few years ago that he was being held on an OT chair throughout the day, and somebody informed her about that. That was denied in the court. So the next child won ABA. It was put out to tender and given to an organisation which claimed that it was ABA, positive behaviour organisation, but it couldn't deliver an ABA programme in school. Another child won ABA. During lockdown, the head wanted to remove not just the programme, but the child as well. And in FOI requests, the parents found lots of things, but they found a discussion between the head and the governors where the head talked about the need for this this urgent annual review, where, of course, they were going to get him out of the school, and was telling the governors that he must have their backing. He needs their support going forward. And then, astonishingly, when the governors were told that the parents may take legal action, the governor said they could do one. Child F had his ABA removed from his EHCP in a review within 2 months of a tribunal decision for ABA. Absolutely no explanation, no justification, no evidence. Gone, out. And finally, on this page, child G, the school stopped ABA and, without the parents knowing, treated him as a child with an attachment disorder and used psychoanalytic therapies on him. So they'd rather pretend to be Freud than Skinner. And what damage they've done, goodness knows. So I'm going to finish with this one now, and I'm so sorry for being late. I couldn't log in properly. I've put down a few ideas here just for solutions. It sounds simplistic given all the things that I say one has to face, but it is things that you really need to take on board. If you've got a young child, you really need to get going early. You must get your detail. You know, I've been where people have had no VB map, don't take notes or minutes when they talk to people in schools. You have to do that. I'm sorry, but you do. And get as many hours in as you can if you're dealing with a very young child. I would say delay a start as well, because if you don't and they go to school and is having ABA at home, they'll say they did it. That sounds awful, because some of them, of course, are marvellous. But I'm talking about the ones that aren't. You need the early discussion, but you need the minutes and you need to keep the emails. Finally, data collection, graphs, tables, absolutely crucial alongside the narrative report. So it's the detail of the procedures and how things have to be changed, the multiple trials, what you have to do in order to engage and motivate that child, which is key to it all. How can you motivate that child to want to learn? So I'm going to stop there, and if there are any questions.
Lisa, thank you so much. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Lisa?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, shall I take this off?
That's good. I just wasn't sure. Lisa, thank you so much. That was horrific. The talk was wonderful, but what you had to say, the content was absolutely horrific. The comments that were coming in as you were speaking, people are very shocked that this is actually really happening. People thought you were talking about historical contexts, and I was confirming that this is actually happening right now. We have some particular questions. Here is Atia is asking, before going to an independent tribunal, what are some of the main reasons local authorities try to block ABA in mainstream primary school? And I know you've already partly answered that, but do you want to add to that, Lisa?
So just repeat that question, because
before going to an independent tribunal, what are some of the main reasons local authorities try to block ABA in mainstream primary schools?
Well, if you're looking at the law, the kinds of things that are said or will be said in order to block it will be, it'll affect the education of the other children. So that is one, that's often used. That is because everybody has a right. Every child has a right to mainstream education. The parents have the right to get mainstream education for their child, but the one situation within which it will be refused is if they affect the education of the other children. Now, the thing about that is that one with ABA, if it's the case, we can say, but we can do something about that. We can put in accommodations, we can put the program in, and it won't affect the efficient education of the other children. But that's a key issue. That's the sort of thing that will be said. There are numerous kind of bits of misinformation that will come out. I've dealt with some of them. They say, oh, well, we haven't got a spare room, and thinking that you're always going to be spending all your time sitting in a spare room, and then various other things. But the core legal objection, which could stop it happening, is that the efficient education of other children, and the remedy is the ABA.
Yeah, Maha is wondering if your child has done only ABA so far, would they ever say that you haven't ever tried the traditional approach, another approach, and that would be an argument against offering ABA in the schools?
Well, it's highly unlikely. I mean, it would depend on the age of the child, but it's highly unlikely that they've not had other forms of input, especially if they're in a school. In fact, I say it's impossible. So if you have a situation where the child is completely home educated, you've never taken up any of the offers, of the parent groups or any of the other things in nursery, it's absolutely never been and done anything else, but you are asking for ABA in a school, possibly, or an ABA school. The biggest issue is that of risk, and that is removing something which works. Because if he's never ever tried it, any other thing, well, why would you do it? That's an experiment. Why would you start doing that when you know that ABA works? So yeah. It's the risk. You'd be putting a child in an experiment, and it would be very, very, very risky thing to do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that makes an awful lot of sense, doesn't it? Why would you why fix if it ain't broke?
Yeah,
sort of thing. Right. Yeah. Right. So Atiya is asking also, how would you find the implementation of a full-time ABA program in the school? How can it be done successfully? One of the feedback I've had is that the children are taken out of the classroom to do ABA work, which means they miss out social time with fellow students in a mainstream classroom. So do you find that that's what happens? The kids are getting taken out, or can ABA also, in your experience, can it be recommended to be part of the general curriculum, general classroom management?
That's correct. That's the whole point. This is the whole point is that a child can be integrated into the school system. We were talking about integration in 1970. For children with other difficulties before people had really understood what autism was. So the whole point is that it becomes, the program is so good, and the tutors are so good, the BCBA and the training and so on, it becomes embedded. So this comes back to my metaphor of the tapestry, that the whole thing is embedded, the environment embedded, embedded, as it were. The ABA will be embedded into the environment. Yeah. So if they do need to go off to a small room, that will be because because the children, there will be lots of things on the, say for instance, the verbal behavior, the VB map, there will be lots of things in there they need to learn. And if they're not also doing this program at home, if it's only in school, they will need to spend some time in a small room actually doing that, and actually catching up, and actually doing sort of prerequisite skills, so that when they're back in the class, they'll understand it. so that they will know what to do, which if they were just been thrown at the deep end, they wouldn't. So it should not detract from, it should be, this is what it comes down to, the management of the program. That if they're going into that small room to do the prerequisite skills, to catch up, to fill up that VB map, they also must be involved with their peers, because that's the whole idea of it.
We have a really, thank you. I mean, it really boils down to the individually, to the programs being individually tailored to meet the needs of that particular child. And if they need individual attention, then that's what they should get. And if they need group attention, then that's what they should get. Here's a really interesting question from Joe. Why is it that parent after parent have to go through this process, and that precedents set by earlier family battles can't be used to prevent this from happening time and time again for kids with similar needs on the same trajectory?
Mm-hmm. Well, what happens is that that they look at the child, that one, the one that you go in with. That's why, you know, I mentioned someone earlier who said, "Oh, well, I've just found this bit of research," you know, and was really shot down, because the point is that even though there is all that, they need to know how that applies to the child. Does it work for that particular child? So it's irrelevant to say, yeah, but look at, you know, they've all got it, so we should. Now, even though I say that, I know that some countries, in America, I think in particular, recognize the value of it. So that fragmentation in the very, very early days that I referred to, that's less likely to happen, because they're going to get referred very, very quickly over there, but not here, not here. So, I mean, you know, that is the problem. It really comes down to each child, whilst bearing in mind the research, bearing in mind other cases. It is only that child on that day that they're interested in. But there's a wider question. The wider question is for the system, not just judges, not in the courtroom now, but the school system. You know, it should be in schools. You know, why they're messing about, you know, with things where, oh, they've got, it looks very nice, and you know, all the rest of it. I mean, that child I tell you I was observing on Zoom, they've got him now where he's not dashing into the toilet and running around with no clothes on, thank goodness, as he was 2 years ago, but he didn't do anything. So in an hour, he spent nearly 15 minutes just lying on the floor. In a writing task, he spent 14 seconds writing. Well, he didn't write. He went with a pencil, and then chucked it away, and then shot out of the chair. You know, so at some point, rather like the kind of NHS is kind of realizing that actually, you know what, I think that method might be helpful here. They're going to have to realize that you know, this does work when it's done properly, and it needs to go into the system. And that's when you shift away from just looking at a single child within a courtroom into, you know, the policy. I mean, you know, you've written about that very, very eloquently.
Yeah, I mean, it goes. I mean, Mickey's asking here: in what ways can parents be more proactive in turning the tide against ABA? And I mean, taking local councils into the tribunal is obviously one way, but have you any other suggestions what parents could actually do to be proactive? Because it's all very well as academics writing about these things, and that's important because it's basically giving the parents the arguments, but ultimately it's going to have to be the parents, because the courts and the public won't listen to academics, because it's always going to be just academics in an ivory tower. It's ultimately the parents that are going to have to do the battle. We can only give them the arguments and the science. So what do you think could parents do to be more proactive?
Well, the difficulty is, of course, because one's talking about a sort of juggernaut here, you know, with people there's a lot of money, even though they claim they've got nothing, you know, millions of pounds to each council for high-end need. And they pay out a lot of money to fight parents. So parents have to group. They have to get together And there are lots of parents who are together on Facebook and what have you. There needs to be meetings, get together with people. The problem with it, and I know that some groups have tried it, is that compromises happen.
Mm-hmm.
So 1 or 2, 3 or 4 parents may think they're really, they're getting somewhere because they've got a meeting with an officer. And what they may find, they may get somewhere, but generally, I think the problem is that the compromises will get in the way, and they may find that they walk away with rather less than they thought they'd got. So I think it's difficult. I think some of the exposures, we've got the Ombudsman, we've got the FOI and the SAR. I think to expose some of the bad practice is very important. I mean, there was a Panorama program where I think a father had been offered £100,000 to get out of the county, which is so. I mean, it's a kind. People. There are always people around to make documentaries. So it really, but it does need sort of families to kind of come together and have discussions, really.
Yeah. I think I've just seen here in the chat somebody has put up the web page for ABA for All. That is a very good place for parents to start to get together.
Yeah. In fact, I meant to do that on here because Jane really has absolute champion for years. Don't you? And
there's a heap of information on that web page as well for parents to look up there. She has lists of schools and things like that. So very useful. So you've got you've got the web link there. So
very good.
There are a few more questions that are sort of going into some detail, but I think we've actually covered most of those things, and some other things have been covered in on the chat, especially where to find good ABA professionals. The UK SPA has now got a register for ABA professionals, so that's a good place to start looking for people in your local area. So I think maybe we can leave it at that, Lisa, because we've really got an awful lot of information. I think some people got in the commentary here have gotten quite upset and sort of think, is that really? I mean, that's hard to believe that this is actually going on, but I know it is, and it's really important.
Well, I've struggled with it. Because
it's really important to know.
Well, it is, isn't it? I mean, so. Do you tell people, look at the Taliban women? I mean, what do they stay silent now? No, you've got to tell people what's going on. I mean, things, some of the things that are very, very dangerous. All the misinformation, the things you do. You're challenging some of that because the damage that can do to thousands. Just putting out those guidelines. This is really, it's a very serious matter. And then the casual comments that can come out from a person who hasn't a clue what they're talking about. And really, this is unacceptable.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, it's been very, very informative. And I think it's really important to have had you on the webinars. And I'm delighted for the center to actually have been able to talk to you and have you present this, because this is so important. And Joe has just made a comment here, and I think it's probably a lovely comment to finish on. Lisa, you're doing such important, life-changing work. Much respect to you.
Oh,
those are nice comments, and those, I think, generally the comments here are sort of, where can we get hold of you? I know. There's been a few of those, and I didn't read them all out because I know that that's not really what this talk is about. No. But for professionals to look at the UK SPA register is probably the best place to start, really, for parents to have a look at. So is there anything else you would like to say yourself, Lisa?
No, I'm just very, very grateful to you, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm at the sort of tail end of my career now, and it's not been easy because there are so many children and desperate parents and local authorities that, you know, are trying to stop them getting what they need, and it's frustrating, it's upsetting, but we must, you know, every little little flower that pops up, you know, it's going to grow bigger, and those little kids are where you just got to look at how they can grow and benefit, and it's all worth it then.
Yeah. Well, one idea I've had some time ago was using videos, because there are a lot of videos on YouTube, and if any parents whose children are grown up and have had benefited from ABA, if those adults that have benefited from ABA would speak to the camera and put it on YouTube, if that's what they felt comfortable to do, those kind of videos would be really, really useful, because there's a lot of anti-ABA stuff going on. We need more positive reports from people that have personal experience with it. As children, it's a bit difficult because they probably don't remember too much, but if they were non-verbal at 4 or 5 years of age and they can now talk to camera, those would be very valuable. I've been able to get a couple of people speaking to camera, but I think those videos would be very, very useful for everybody.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, okay, thanks very much, Lisa. You've given lots of your time and lots of your expertise, and I'm sure that was very, very informative talk. So thank you very much. And I can see a lot of thank yous coming here on the chat as well. Yeah, lots of thank you. Thank you very much. Everybody says. Okay.
Oh, well, thank you to everybody for listening.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Right. Take care.